Hi guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to make this 3D peacock, and we're going to make it in two parts. You're going to make the tail separate from the body, and if you want the head to be arched like this one, you'll need a pipe cleaner to stuff in the body. And these bands that I used here I bought from the dollar store a long time ago, so you can use whatever color you want for your peacock. That's up to you. The body itself, you'll need 106 bands with all these decorations and feet and eyes and everything. If you don't have a pipe cleaner to put in his head is just going to be straight like this guy here. So let's get started. Let's make the tail, and I'm going to show you how to make it 7 pegs long like this white one. And you're going to be using your loom in a staggered or offset configuration like this. I'm doing only 7 rows long just to show you or give you an example of how to do the tail. It's pretty repetitive. So if I'm going to do it 7 pegs long, so I'm going to start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then I'm going to follow my pyramid, and at the bottom I'm going to use 5 pegs. So for my 5 pegs on either side, I'm going to drop a single band. These are connector bands, and for my inner pegs, I'm going to drop 2 connector bands for each center peg, and that'll connect it to our row number 4. So this is row 7, 6, 5, and as we go down our pyramid, we're going to do 4, 3, 2, 1. So now we're going to take a single band and we're going to zigzag on our loom, creating V's and W's on all the pegs that have our connector bands. And we're starting in the lower row, so I'm doing row number 5 right now, taking our single band and just doing zigzags and V's. So that's what yours should look like. Now we're going to continue up to the 7th row. Once again, we want to finish our pyramid and do your zigzag. A single band at a time, just one peg to the other, creating our tail. So that's what yours should look like, and you can do a maximum of 13 pegs long for your tail using your entire loom if you want. And you're going to do the same thing, find your pyramid and putting the outside connector band starting here with a single band if you're doing 13 pegs, and then the inside pegs would have 2 single bands to connect your rows. So once we've done this, we're going to put our eye, and I did the odd number on the top of our tail so that way the eye is staggered evenly, and looping it 4 times to cap it off. There's one with my eye. Next one I'll do white to give it some space, so that's 2, 3, 4. Another eye. And you can use whatever color you want. I'm just showing you this in white so you can see what I'm doing. So that's what yours should look like. Every other one should have your eye color band on there. Let's loop up. We're going to go in the side peg, grabbing the bottom single, and each side peg only has a single band. Loop up, and you should see the nice teardrop and onto itself. Go to the next peg. It should have 2 single bands. underneath the cap band, grabbing the top single and loop up. You see the nice teardrop? Take it there, loop it onto itself, go back in, grabbing the bottom single, and very carefully, wherever the teardrop forms, take it there. And just continue down the row, grabbing the top single first, and then the bottom single. And wherever the teardrop forms, take it there. So my 7th row, the top row is done, and if you did more rows, then just go ahead and loop until you're done. And now since our eye is on the 7th row, on this middle row here, that's where we're going to add our other eye, so it's staggered around on our tail and not so close together. So for the bands to loop up to the 5th row, we're going to take a single band, or eye bands, loop it 4 times on the hook, and do a few because you're going to need it for our eye on the 5th row. I'm doing 2 right now, and I'm going to do the side ones first to stagger it evenly on our tail. So I'm going into the side peg, grabbing the bottom single band, loop up, you should see the nice teardrop, and pull your eye onto that band and then loop it onto the 5th peg. Go to the other side, same thing, grabbing the bottom single band, pull your eye and get it onto that band and loop it down. Let's get a few more eyes onto your hook. Once again, just looping a single band 4 times. Doing 2. You can do as many as you want, just leave it on your hook. So my eye is here. I'm going to skip 1, 2, and I'm going to loop my eye onto this band. So in the 2nd peg on my tail, I'm going to go in, grabbing the top single, loop it up, see the teardrop form, and loop it down to that peg. Repeat, go in, grab the bottom single, loop up and onto itself. Now this is the band that I want to loop my eye. And let's see, we're going to go in this peg under those bands, grabbing the top single and loop up. The teardrop forms to here, so I'm just going to loop it. The next one, going under, grabbing that single band, the bottom single, and that's the band I want to put my eye on, so pull your eye off of your hook and onto the peg below that it belongs to. Once again, we're going to skip 2, so our eye is here. 1, 2, we want it on this band, so go in this peg. We want to grab the top single, the bottom top single, pull it, and that's the band I want, and pull your eye onto that band and loop it down. Go back in, grabbing the bottom single and loop onto itself. Let's finish this row. Always grabbing the bottom single. Now I've done looping all these rows, the 7th and the 6th to the 5th row, and yours should look very similar to this one. If you miss a band, make sure you go in and loop it up and over, and you should have a nice teardrop. And my eyes are here all staggered. Now we're going to take row 7 and 6 off, make sure you do not have any bands coming off the 5th row. So just going in, pulling all your bands off the 7th and 6th row very carefully. Push it down a little so it doesn't come off. Now we're going to take the back pegs off and we're going to transfer it to the front. But in the meanwhile, let's take the front one off and transfer it to the back and make sure it's still in the staggered configuration once you put it back in. So that's what yours should look like. So we're down to row 5, 4, and 3 following our pyramid. So row 3 has 3 pegs, and to set up, remember to put your connector band so the outside pegs should have a single band to connect to a next row, and then the inner peg should have 2 bands. And mine only has 3 pegs, so that's all I'm going to do. Now we're going to take a single band starting from the row 3 to 4. We're going to do our zigzag and remember our pyramid. With a single band, just zigzag on all the pegs that have our connector bands. Like that. And now the connector bands are here in the bottom on the 5th row. We're going to go in, grabbing the loop down there, the band that's just hanging out, and loop it down to the 4th peg. So you see the pyramid forming. The 2nd peg should have 2 bands down there, just loose. Grab the top one and loop it on either side. It's up to you. You can do it to the right or to the left. It doesn't matter. Go back in, grabbing the bottom loose band, and loop it to the other side. And just repeat for each peg. So in the end, that's what yours should look like, forming a nice pyramid, and there shouldn't be any more connector bands in the bottom. Now we're going to loop up, and once again, we're not adding the eye because the eye is on this row. We're going to add it on this row here on these bands. So we're going to go in, go all the way under, grabbing the bottom single, and loop up. And you see the nice teardrop and onto itself. Continue in the center row, same thing. Go all the way under, grabbing the top single, and loop up and onto itself, and you should see the nice teardrop. If you don't see the nice teardrop, you pulled the wrong band. Grabbing the bottom single, the nice teardrop, loop up and onto itself. And the side peg should only have a single band to loop up, so you want to go under, grabbing that bottom single band and loop up and onto itself. And you should see all these nice teardrops forming, 2 on each peg. Now on this row we're going to add our eye. So get our eye onto a hook, taking the single band, looping it 4 times. And I'll probably need 3 for this row. So with our eye on a hook, we're going to loop. I'm going to start with the outside ones, reaching in, grabbing the bottom single, and loop up. See the nice teardrop, and pulling the band onto that loop, and put it on that peg there onto itself. Let's go to the right side, grabbing the bottom single very carefully. Loop up, see the nice teardrop. Getting our eye onto our tail. And loop it back onto the peg below it, onto itself. And we want to skip 2 bands, 1, 2. You can either put it here or here since it's an even number. So you decide. But going into the center peg, grabbing the top bottom single band and see your teardrop and loop down. Repeat for the other band, go in, grabbing the bottom single, see your nice teardrop, and loop down. I'm just going to add it on this band here. So that's what yours should look like. And once again, I'm just giving you a general idea of how to do your tail with 7 pegs long, and you can do it as long as 13 pegs, just using the same technique. Taking all the bands off except for the front pegs, the bands on the front pegs, make sure it's on there. Now we're going to shift. Moving the back pegs off, we're going to shift it to the front and move the front off and shifting it to the back, making sure it's in the staggered configuration. Now I'm on rows 3, 2, and 1, and this is how you want to end your tail on row number 1 with 1 peg. And here, since we're on the last row, we're not going to put any connector band. We're just going to take our single band and do our V from the first to the second row, like that. And then our connector bands are already there, so we're going to pull the loose bands underneath on the top row and connect it to the second row, forming our pyramid. We can repeat on the other side if you want, so you can see the pyramid here. And then the center 2 bands, just taking the top loose band and loop it on either side, whichever one you decide, it doesn't matter. Reach under, grab the other loose one, and loop it to the other side. So that's what yours should look like. And now we're not going to add any eyes on this row at all, we'll just leave it blank. So we're going to go under all the bands, grabbing the bottom single band, and when you pull it, you should see the nice teardrop, and loop it down. Repeat for the other ones. Going under this center one, we want to grab the top bottom single. So there should be 2 bands. We're going to grab the top one and loop up. See the nice teardrop and loop it onto itself. Reaching back in, grabbing the last bottom single. See the nice teardrop and loop it down. Finally, the side one, same thing. We're going to go grabbing the bottom single and loop onto itself. And finally, our last 2 bands, going under, grabbing the bottom single for both sides. Now we're taking our last single band, the color of our peacock, twist double it, and we're going to put a hook in that peg in row 1 all the way through, like we're tying a slip knot. Pull our bands through and getting it onto a hook like that, so the 4 loops are on a hook, and we can take it off the loom. So that's what your tail should look like. This is again an example, and this is the actual tail that I'm going to do in the tutorial. So you can make your tail as long as you want, and it'll take more bands. So go ahead and pause the video and finish up your tail and come back when you're done. For the wings, you can make it whatever color you want, and you're going to need a total of 7 bands. I'll show you how to make one, and you'll have to pause the video to make the second one. Taking a single band that's the color of your body, looping it from the first to the second, second to the third, and third to the fourth. Like that. Now taking the outside color, whatever it is, looping it diagonally from the second to the third peg in the center, and down one from the third to the fourth, and closing it up from the fourth to the side fourth peg. Taking another single band for a holding band, and you want it to be the same color as this band here. So if you switch in color, use that color. We're going to double it and looping it on these three pegs, creating a triangle like that, and make sure it doesn't overlap. Now taking a single band, the same color as our body, and capping that off by looping it once. Now we're going to go under the cap band, grabbing the top single and loop up and onto itself. You want to see the nice teardrop. Let's continue up the center, reaching in and only grabbing the bottom single. And you're going to loop that up and over to the center. Now go in, grabbing the bottom single and loop up and onto itself, creating the nice teardrop. Now let's loop this side, the left side. We're going to go in, grabbing the bottom single and loop up and onto itself, creating the nice teardrop, reaching in, grabbing the bottom single. Just continue up to the first left peg. And let's take your wing off your loom. Get it onto a hook, and we can do a loose slip knot. And set our wing aside to attach to our body later. So go ahead and pause the video to make your second wing and come back when you're done. Let's make our eye. I'm taking a single black band, and you can make it whatever color you want, looping it 4 times on your hook. Repeat for the other eye, looping it 4 times on the hook. Taking a single band, mine will be ocean blue, the color of my peacock, and pulling the eyes onto that single band. Repeat for the other eye. You can make your peacock whatever color you want. And set it aside. For the beak, I'm taking a single band and looping it on the second peg from the bottom. Twist to the left, creating an X in the center. Twist to the right, creating an X on the outside, and looping it onto the second peg from the bottom. Twist to the right again, and looping that band once again to the second peg from the bottom. And then we're going to pull the bottom band on the left side up and over to the center, creating the knot, and repeat for the other side, grabbing the bottom single, looping it to the center. And that's our beak, and let's get it on a hook like that. Taking another single band, twist double, and pulling all those loops off of a hook and onto the single we just doubled. So that's my beak. Taking my ocean blue, the color of my peacock, twist double, and getting my beak onto that single we doubled. And let's leave it on the hook for the time being. Let's make our feet. I already made one. We're just going to take a single band, looping it 4 times on the hook. Repeat for the other one, taking another single band, looping it 4 times on the hook, like that. Grabbing another single band, twist double, and pulling all 8 loops onto that single we doubled. Center it, getting it onto our hook. Taking a single band, the color of your peacock, and pulling all those loops onto the single band, And let's set our feet aside to add to our body later. On our loom, I'm going to be working in this area so you can see what I'm doing. Taking our beak and we're looping it on the right first peg, twist in the center, the other two loops, and putting it onto the second peg from the top. So that's what yours should look like. Taking another single band, twist double, and looping it from the first center to the second right peg on your loom. Taking a single band, 4 of them, and looping it on all 4 pegs. So that's what yours should look like. Now taking this part, our decorative part for the top of our peacock, taking to whatever color you want, getting whatever color you want to use, taking 2 bands, and we're going to put a hook from the inside out between the first center and the first right peg, and grabbing those 2 bands, and we're just going to tie a slip knot. So getting the loops onto your hook, pulling it onto the other one or over the other one, and pulling it tightly to tie our slip knot. Now we're going to go under, grabbing the bottom 2 bands and loop up and over to the center for all 4 pegs. Push it down, make sure that part up top, it doesn't get in the center. Now for row number 3, we're adding our eyes, and we're looping it on the right first to the right second peg. Our other eye, we're looping it on the center first to center second peg on the loom. And taking a single band and covering it from the second to second peg on the side, and the first center to the first right peg, like that. Now taking our next 2 bands for the top of our head, putting it from the inside out once again on the band that's covering the first center to the right first peg, and grabbing the 2 loops, and once again tying a slip knot. Pull it tightly and loop the bottom 2 bands up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Push everything down. So that was row number 3. Row 4, we're going to take 2 single bands, and we're going to cover all 4 pegs. Like that. And now we're going to loop the bottom 2 bands up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Push it down, and we're going to repeat the same for rows 5 through 9. So taking 2 single bands, covering all 4 pegs, and then pulling the bottom 2 loops up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg. So that was row number 5. I'm going to continue 6 through 9, the same process, taking 2 single bands, covering the 4 pegs, and then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. And if your beak is in the way and it's hard to work in the area, just pull it out to the side when it's time. So I'll come back when I'm done. So that was row number 9. Row number 10, I'm going to take a single, twist double, and going to loop it on the pegs, and I'm doing it 4 times to cover the 4 pegs. Single, twist double, So that's what yours should look like. And now we're going to pull the bottom 2 loops up and over to the center, and you should have 4 loops left on each peg. Push it down. So that was row number 10. Now I'm going to expand. I'm going to pull a loop or 2 loops off of the center first peg that's attached to the first right peg and moving it to the left first peg. So pulling the top 2 loops off of the center first, and I see it's attached to the center second, and I don't want those 2 loops. Set it aside, pulling the next 2 loop off of the center first, and it should be attached to the right first peg, and I'm moving those to the left first peg, like that, and then reattaching the first 2 loops we took off to the center first, and that should be attached to the center second peg. Now we're going to pull 2 loops off of the center second peg that's attached to the first and moving it to the center third. So grabbing the top 2 loops, check to make sure it's attached to the center first and move it to the center third. It's tight, so be very careful. And then moving these 2 loops off of the center second, and I'm attaching it to the left second peg. For row number 11, we're taking 6 single bands to cover the 6 pegs, and then looping the bottom bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Go under. The left first and second peg should have 2 loops. Pull that up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg, along with the first center peg and the third center peg. The first and second right peg should have 4 loops underneath. Pulling those bands up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg. And that's what yours should look like. And now we're going to expand to 8 pegs, so we're going to pull these 2 loops off of the center third peg and moving it to the center fourth. Now going to the side, take the top single loop off, check to make sure it's attached to the first side peg, and it is. I'll move it to the third. Go to the other side, pull the top loop off, and check to make sure it's attached to the first right peg, and it is, and moving it to the third. For our wings, we're going to take the loose slip knot off, and we want to attach it so that way the part where it's closest to the body is facing up, and we're going to attach it to the center first peg to the left first peg. So once again, the part that's closest to the body should be up for our wing. Repeat for the other side, taking our wing, undo a loose slip knot, making sure the part that's closest to the body and the wing is on the outside is facing up, and we're attaching it right first to right second peg on our loom. And for the rest, we're taking a single band to cover our 8 pegs, and then looping the bottom bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. The first left peg has 2 loops to pull up and over, and I have 2 loops left. And the second and third have a single loop to pull up and over to the center. Making sure you're pulling the right bands. You should have 2 loops left on each peg. The center one has 2 loops to pull up and over to the center, and the right, second, and third each has a single loop to pull up and over. And you want to make sure you have 2 loops left once you loop the bottom 2 bands up and over to the center. Push everything down. Row 13 we'll add the feet, and we're going to loop it on the left second to third peg, and the other one on the third to center 4th peg. And for the rest of our pegs, we're looping a single band around our loom to cover our pegs, and then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Making sure you always pull the bottom 2 bands up and over. Push it down. Row 14, we're taking a single band to cover our 8 pegs, and then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Row number 15, we're going to attach our wing to our body, so we're going to pull the cap band on our wing, the bottom of our wing, there should be 2 loops, and getting it onto our single band, and we're going to attach it on the right second to third peg. And for the other side, we're going to take the cap band on the tip of our wing, getting it onto our single band and looping it on the second left to first left peg on our loom, and it should be on the outside of our body like that. And for the rest of our pegs, taking a single band to cover our loom. We're going to reach under, grabbing the bottom 2 bands up and over, and especially where the wings are, you want to reach under, grabbing the bottom 2 bands, making sure the wings are on the outside, like that, and reaching up and over to the center. Reaching under this wing, grabbing the bottom 2 bands up and over to the center. You should have 2 loops left on each peg. Row 16, we're going to take 8 single bands to cover our 8 pegs, and then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Once again, where the wings are, push the wings down, grabbing on the inside, and looping the bands up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg, and making sure our wing is not looped in there. Pulling our wing down and pulling the bottom 2 loops up and over to the center. So that was our last row, and now let's take it off the loom and make sure our feet's on the outside of our body. Let's take it off the loom anywhere, grabbing the 2 loops off of the 8 pegs and going clockwise. Make sure you only grab the 2 loops and not the wings. Getting it onto our hook. So there's our peacock so far. If you have a pipe cleaner, we can put that inside the head if you want. So from the tip of our head, we're going to put our hook through our neck. If you don't have a pipe cleaner, you don't have to put it in there. It'll just sit straight, and put it through to the bottom. Getting our pipe cleaner onto a hook. And pulling the neck down, and it should slide right onto or inside our body like that, and take off our hook. The pipe cleaner is in there. Cut the pipe cleaner. And let's stuff the body, and it's better to use the same color band so that way it doesn't show through. Be careful not to cut your finger on the pipe cleaner. And don't overstuff him. Now taking a single band, we're going to pull all those loops off of our hook and onto the single band to tie a slip knot. The jelly band is really slippery, so be careful that it doesn't come apart. So there's our peacock so far, and you can fix the eyes and the beak and everything so it looks right for you. Make sure it's not twisted. So there's our peacock so far, and now let's add the tail. We're going to take the loop for a slip knot along with any 4 loops on the top of his back, so that way it's centered like that. Taking a single band, twist double, and pulling all those loops off of our hook and onto the single we doubled. And now let's add the tail, and this part is really confusing, so please watch carefully. We're going to be transferring the 2 loops that's on the hook that's attached to the body onto the 2 loops that are attached to the tail. And we want our tail to be facing up. First, we're going to get our hook that's attached to our body, and if you don't have a second hook, you should have this loop on the tail on a holding instrument. Now we're going to grab the front 2 loops that's closest to the end of our holding hook or instrument, and getting it onto the hook that's attached to our body. Getting the 2 loops off of the holding hook and onto the hook that's attached to our body, and we're going to pull the center 2 loops or the front 2 loops that's attached to the body and pulling the 2 loops that we pulled off the tail and onto that hook that's attached to the body. So now the 2 loops on that's attached to the body is attached to the tail. And now let's take the front 2 loops off of our hook. And we have only 2 loops left on the hook, and that's attached to the body, like that. Now on the other side, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get the hook that's attached to the body and pulling the 2 loops off of the holding instrument and onto the hook that's attached to the body, and take the other holding instrument away. Now the 2 loops that's attached to the tail is on near the front of our hook, and the 2 loops that's attached to the body is near the back of our hook. And now we're going to pull the 2 loops to the back and pulling it up and over a hook and getting it onto the 2 loops that's attached to the tail. And so now all our loops are attached to the 4 loops that's on our tail, and we got it all on the hook. So that's what your tail should look like. It's now attached to the body, and we're going to pull the back 2 loops up and over, just tying a slip knot. So that's what yours should look like. And we're going to open up the 2 loops that's left on the hook from our slip knot, and we're going to pull our tail through so that way it doesn't slide off. So pulling that knot open, or this band open, and sliding our tail through and securing it to the back of our tail like that. So now our tail is attached to the body, and make sure everything's in place and that our feet is not sticking inside our body. If it is, just pull it out. Fix any loose bands that you may have, and make him look the way that you want. So there's your peacock. I hope you like him. Thanks for watching.